When I was a kid, before we lived in Texas, we lived in a home that had this huge backyard in Georgia that made me feel like the most popular kid in class. Anytime playing outdoor games or sports was ever an idea, my backyard would be the spot to go since we had a 2-acre backyard. The backyard was surrounded by woods on 3 sides. It also had many trees throughout the yard, a trampoline in one corner, a hot tub, a big detached 3-car garage, and an above-ground pool. For a middle-class area, we really had everything you could want in a backyard. There was enough open grass to play any sports: soccer, baseball, football, anything. We even played hide-and-seek tag, or manhunt as we would call it. One Friday when we were in like 6th grade, my friends and I wanted to have a camp-out sleepover in my backyard. It was Mike, other Mike, who I'll call Michael, and Jason. We all had to get our parents' permissions, of course, but we were like 11 or 12 and it was a Friday. None of our parents had any reason to say no. Plus, my family has lots of camping equipment, including 2 tents that could easily fit 2 of us in each one. After all of us got permission from our parents, we made arrangements for them to get to my house around 5 so we could play sports in the backyard. We had 2 mini soccer nets in the yard that we used to play soccer 2-on-2. We did that for like half an hour. Then we played baseball for another maybe half hour. And after just sitting around for a few minutes regaining our energy, my parents ordered pizza for us, so we ate around 6:30 or 7 if I had to guess. The sun was starting to go down a little bit now, so now came the time to set up the tents before it was too dark. I was pretty good with setting up tents because I was a Boy Scout and we just recently learned how to set up tents. My friends kind of helped, but I did most of the work. By the time they were done, it was decently dark out. The backyard lights were on, giving a nice glow. It was now dark enough for us to play our favorite game, Manhunt. There were a million spots to hide in the backyard. We played in pairs. It was Mike and I hiding first, and Michael and Jason would be hunting. Mike and I split up. Our goal was to get back to the home base point, which was the back door to the house. No camping by the door was allowed. The trampoline was in a far corner of the yard before the woods. I crawled under that to hide. When the hunters would start looking, they had to blow a whistle to let the hiders know they were starting. Once I heard the whistle, I stayed under the trampoline waiting it out, watching the 2 of them in the distance looking around. I was waiting for a good moment to creep closer to the back door. I had my sights on the hot tub, which was right next to the house. If I could make it over to hide behind the hot tub, I could straight line beeline it to the back door. So when both Michael and Jason had their backs to me looking in different areas of the backyard, I sprinted towards the hot tub, and just as I got right behind it and ducked down, I heard one of the trash bins on the side of the house almost topple over, and then I noticed the motion detecting light on the side turn on. The hot tub was by that corner of the house, but it wouldn't have triggered that light. I went to peer around the corner to the side yard, and I saw a tall person dressed in dark clothes speed walking away in the direction of the woods before entering the woods. It wasn't my dad. I ran to my friends and called the game off, then went to tell my dad about it. We came out and looked around the woods for a few minutes, and then checked the street for any unusual cars. Nothing and nothing. He said we should sleep inside tonight, which obviously bummed us out. We went inside and just played a game on my PlayStation. I again described to my friends what I saw, just some tall guy walking into the woods on the side of the house after apparently almost knocking over one of our trash bins. We talked about just going back outside and sleeping in the tents since they were already set up anyway. And plus, what were the odds whoever that was still out there hours later? After we finished playing our game, we went back outside quietly to not wake my dad up. It's not like we were hiding the fact that we were going back out there, but we didn't want to advertise it either. We each had a sleeping bag. Mike and I shared a tent, while Michael and Jason shared the other. After a while of joking around and yelling things between tents, we started to quiet down and try to go to sleep. I wasn't asleep yet, but it seemed like Mike was. I started hearing walking sounds in the grass nearby, approaching the tent, and then the zipper to the tent was unzipped, and I looked up and saw my dad looking inside the tent. He said, "What are you guys doing out here?" I replied to him something like, "They wanted to sleep out here, so we came back out." Then I took a closer look at the face peering into the tent. I realized it wasn't my dad, but some complete stranger who looked to be my dad's age. It looked like he was about to come in when I screamed bloody murder like a little girl. Everyone woke up, and Mike started to scream as well. The man grabbed our ankles and said to be quiet, but he gave up when he realized he was about to be exposed. He left the tent and disappeared. I told my friends to run inside the house, and as we were running to the house, my dad was already coming out the back door in response to our screams. I told him I don't know which way he went, but that the man from before was back. My dad ran around the yard, screaming and taunting the creep to come back if he has any balls. We heard it from inside the living room. My mom called the police, of course, and all that really happened when the police officer showed up was he took my recount of what happened, and I'm sure he made a police report, then left. It was good to have a police report at least, so that the cops would be aware of a creep going around. I'm not sure if that man ever came back to our property or not, or if he ever got in trouble for something similar. Either way, it was pretty traumatizing, and it could have gone much worse. This was back a few years, sometime in 2019. I was at a friend's house. I'll call her M for the sake of the story. I was pretty excited for this sleepover. I couldn't wait to talk about all the middle school drama. Now, something you might want to know is M's house was deep in the woods. I mean deep. Anywhere you looked, there was woods, and their nearest neighbor was about a half mile away. But on the backside of her house was a cliff that led down to the ocean. The night at M's house started off pretty good. Our friend Sam was there too. We played truth or dare, hide and seek, and other teenage games. It was getting pretty late, but we decided to go on a walk down the gravel road that led to the other houses along the way. We asked her mom, and she said yes, so we started walking. After another 10 to 15 minutes, we saw a man who was walking on the other side of the street towards us. At first, we weren't thinking much. Maybe this dude was just taking an evening walk as well. But something that didn't seem right was that this man was wearing pretty thick clothing. I'm talking, it almost looked like snow gear, and not to mention it was pretty warm out. At that moment, it was like 60 degrees outside. We all looked at each other as we passed the guy, and that's when it hit us. The stench, the disgusting smell coming off that guy. It was absolutely horrible. Words could not describe how disgusting that smell was. It was so bad that after we finally got a few feet away, my friend took a deep breath, almost like she had been holding it. One of my friends ran into the woods and almost threw up. At this point, we felt it was best to head back. Our friend who almost threw up was begging to go back anyway. We all agreed that it would be the best idea to head back. On our way back, we passed him again. This time we held our breath before we passed him. But when we looked back, we realized he was no longer walking in the opposite direction, but instead he was following us. This was really annoying. That disgusting smelling man was now bringing his stench even closer. We had no choice but to speed up our pace. We started speed walking. We still had about a mile to make it back to M's house. As we began to speed up, so did the random disgusting smelling dude. We all looked at each other, scared and annoyed. We picked up our pace even more, almost to the point where we were jogging. But of course, the man sped up even more. Now at this point, we were running, and my friend Sam looked back, and then we heard it. Sam let out a blood-curdling scream as she looked back, which caused Em and I to look back as well. And what we saw, still to this day, absolutely horrifies me. This man was full-on sprinting at us. He had what looked like a knife or something sharp in his grasp. Em, Sam, and I started screaming as we were sprinting down the road. Our screams caused him to stop chasing us, and he eventually just stopped. But he didn't move. He just stood still, watching as we left. We didn't stay around to see what his intentions were. We just ran straight back to Em's house. Once we got back, we slammed the door and decided on not telling her parents, as they were already asleep. We all went to the living room to finish setting up our sleeping areas. A few hours passed. It was about 2 a.m. at this point. We were watching something. I can't remember what, but I know it was some horror movie. Now, I mentioned her house was on a cliff for a reason. Because of this, her house has a lot of windows on the backside overlooking the view. I was sitting on one of the couches that was set up right at the window. It was pitch black outside. All you could hear was the waves and occasional wind. All of a sudden, I heard footsteps outside. They sounded like they were right by the window. I told my friends, and Em said it was probably the deer that always comes by. For 2 years now, Em had been feeding this deer, who always came up to this very window. I got pretty excited, as this meant this deer would come right up to my hand. I decided to look out the window, and I didn't see anything. It was too dark. I said that we should go outside to pet the deer, but Em and Sam said no. They reminded me about what happened earlier, And I agreed. So we went back to watching the movie. Another hour passed and we were all feeling tired. We turned off the TV and headed under our blankets. It was about 45 minutes later. Em and Sam were fast asleep. But I felt like I couldn't rest. Something was up. I had this gut feeling that told me not to go to sleep. So I decided to look outside. The moon was just bright enough that you could see the ocean. So I spent a few minutes just staring outside. As I was staring outside, my eye caught something moving in the woods over to the left. I turned my head that way, but I saw nothing. I knew I saw something moving, so I grabbed a flashlight that was on the bookshelf and I pointed it in the direction of where I saw the movement. Now this was probably the worst idea I could have ever had, because when I did so, I saw that man again, but this time he didn't have any snow gear on. Instead, he was completely shirtless, and I wasn't about to find out what else he didn't have on. So I tried to wake up Em and Sam and tell them what I saw. Sam woke up, but Em was a deep sleeper. I told Sam to look outside, but when we looked, he was gone. Sam looked at me with a pretty angry expression, like I was just messing with her. I told her I wasn't, but she didn't believe me. She went back to bed, and I was left laying there. It was now about 4:30 in the morning. It was still dark outside. I didn't sleep at all. I felt myself drifting off to sleep when I heard a knock on the door. I almost jumped off the couch when I heard it. I knew I shouldn't open it, but my curiosity got the best of me. I walked over to the door and looked out of the peephole, and again I saw nothing. My head had to be playing with me. I again went back to the couch and threw my blanket over my head. I eventually fell asleep, but woke up at around 5 a.m. in a cold sweat. Something wasn't right again. My body wouldn't stop shaking. And then it hit me. That familiar stench. That disgusting smell. I almost threw up right there. But as fast as I sat up, I heard footsteps coming towards me and I screamed. I flicked on the flashlight, and as I did, I saw him, the man from earlier, standing in the corner of the room. My scream woke up Em and Sam, and they screamed too. And as we did this, the man bolted out of the house. Em's mom and dad came running down the stairs, and after a few minutes, we told them everything that happened. Em's mom called the cops, while Em's dad walked down the road with a shotgun, seeing if he could find the man. After that, once the police arrived and got all of our stories, I went home. My parents didn't tell me much when I got home. They hugged me for what felt like hours. And from that moment, I wasn't allowed at sleepovers anymore. Only now, years later, did I finally realize just how bad everything was. The police eventually found the guy, and inside that old shed we were daring each other to go into were 5 dead bodies. And that stench that was on that man's body was the smell of decaying flesh. And if things didn't go the way they went, in the end, my friends and I would have ended up in that shed.